it was a really tumultuous time. The company was struggling, cannabis was struggling, capital was expensive, regulatory frameworks were difficult. But honestly, I can't say enough about the team that remains at MWG.
Welcome to the Dispensary Marketing Podcast, where we interview the top dispensary owners and experts in this space so that you can stay up to date with the latest trends and strategies that you'd otherwise miss out on. I hope you enjoy this episode. Tom, welcome to the Dispensary Marketing Podcast. Thanks for hopping on the show.
Thank you, Brandon, for having me. I'm really excited about this.
Awesome. So for the audience, why don't you tell us or tell them who you are, the name of your store/stores, and where you're located.
Yeah, so my name is Tom Sheridan. I'm the CEO of MW Holdings Group, Inc. MWG operates Perfect Union stores. We are primarily based out of Sacramento, but we have stores all the way from Weed, California to Morro Bay at the current moment.
Awesome. So what was your background before getting into the cannabis space?
So I'm actually an attorney by trade. I started out as a business litigator / real estate attorney. I had the opportunity to represent some folks that were some of the founders of MWG Holdings starting back in late 2011, early 2012. And through that process, I actually started working in cannabis initially through locating real estate and defending unlawful detainer actions that the federal government had instituted on landlords. But I became fascinated with the space, started taking equity interest instead of fees, and here I am. Nice. So it's been a long road, but it's been interesting for sure.
That's awesome. So just from my personal curiosity, so obviously attorney, able to charge high fees, entrepreneurship, similarly to what you spoke about, you're now taking equity or you're building your own equity and stuff like that, right? What was your kind of personal turning point from being somebody that's like, hey, I'm going to go from charging X hours, X retainers to saying, hey, I actually want to own pieces in a company to be able to grow something bigger?
I think it started for me actually at a really young age. I don't think I ever really intended to practice law for a living. Sure. And so my dad was self-employed growing up. So it's kind of all I knew. When I kind of just went to law school, it was something to do. And so without really giving it a ton of thought. And then when I started practicing law, I only practiced at a firm for 3 years before I started my own shop. And so I was kind of already working for myself. But I've always been wired to kind of take that next step to, I'd always bet on myself versus fees. And so the, people like that standard, consistent hourly rate. I found that when you bet on yourself, there's no better bet to make if you believe in yourself.
Right. I mean, a lot of people, they dedicate themselves to being able to be in the professional space, whether it's attorney, doctor, dentist, so on and so forth, right? So were you just always somebody that had a keen eye to be able to explore opportunities? Were you just naturally talented at being able to do very hard things? What was your kind of outlook on life to be able to just say, hey, I'm going to become an attorney? Because I don't think a lot of people can say that.
Yeah, it seemed like the thing to do. Actually, when I first decided to become an attorney, I was trying to decide, and I'll never forget the day. I was sitting in my parents' living room. I was 19 years old, and I was trying to decide whether to be an attorney or go to flight school. Two completely opposite things. I called a couple flight schools in Florida. They told me what their folks were making after they got done. And it wasn't very much money. And I thought, gosh, that's a long time to not make a ton of money. And so I guess I'll go to law school. And that kind of sealed the deal for me. The law school experience was unbelievable. Great degree. I tell everybody great degree, horrible profession. A lot of people love it. It wasn't for me practicing law day in, day out. You're tracking your time in 6-minute blocks. And you end up specializing in a pretty unique, usually field because the law is so broad, right? You go to law school, you can practice any kind of law you want, but you end up kind of in one specific area, which is then just day in, day out grind. What I liked about, at least initially hanging out my own shingle, was that then I could do any kind of law that I wanted. So I kind of bounced around. I did real estate, I did business lit in a whole bunch of different areas. And then the opportunity came up for cannabis. And so I had actually already started flipping houses and developing real estate before the cannabis opportunity came around. Nice. A client had told me that, hey, they said nobody's time's worth $350 to $500 an hour, which is what I was charging at the time. I actually knew what he was making on his deals by reverse engineering and kind of what they were doing. I thought, gosh, you're doing a lot better than I am. And what you're doing is actually a little bit easier than what I'm doing. So I should just be you. And so I started becoming, kind of my own client in a sense. And then the cannabis opportunity came around. And what I realized about cannabis is, number one, at that point in time, late 2011, early 2012, you actually couldn't find decent attorneys to work in the cannabis space because everybody was scared of criminal prosecution at that point. And so these folks were underrepresented, which is unfortunate. And then I met some of these guys, and they didn't look like your traditional business folks that I was working with. Most of them had sleeve tattoos, interesting haircuts, earrings, things like that, but just insanely talented. And so especially the group that actually ended up forming MWG Holdings was made up of some of the best business talent that I'd seen. And so I thought, man, this is an underrepresented space. There's some real talent here that's being, underestimated. And so I actually called 3 white collar criminal attorneys that I knew. 2 of them told me I was going to be fine. One of them told me that I was going to prison. And so I told my wife, I said, hey, majority rules. And I started representing initially just in litigation some of these cannabis folks. And so, and how it had come out was that the federal government at that point in time had sent letters to the landlords in and around Sacramento saying that you're leasing space to, a criminal enterprise. And so if you don't do something, we're going to seize your property. So for the price of the stamp, the federal government got these landlords to institute these fairly massive, litigious actions trying to kick these folks out. Even though their leases were, based in California, which it was legal at that point in some form or fashion, the leases actually specified that they were for medical cannabis dispensaries, and the landlord still said, hey, we're going to lose our buildings here, so we're going to kick you out. And that's how I got in the space. So it was a pretty tumultuous time, to be honest with you. And so these guys didn't know whether they'd be able to stay, whether their business would be able to continue to operate. And it was kind of a day by day, wartime type process. So
Right. So that's 2011, 2012 is kind of when you got your feet wet more so into the cannabis space and stuff like that.
Correct. And so, go ahead.
No, continue.
Yeah. So then I kind of stayed in that quasi attorney capacity for several years while developing relationships and kind of figuring out where I fit in. At some point in time, I went to David Spradlin, who was one of the founders of MWG, and I said, look, I'm spending tons of hours here. This doesn't make sense for me to charge you. It doesn't make sense for you to pay me. I like what you guys are doing. We all click well together. I'd like to just join forces with you guys. And that's what we did at that point. And so that was sometime around 2014, 15. It kind of all blends together now. But then ultimately we had developed a lot of different stuff. We formed it all into one umbrella in late 2016, 17, which is now MWG Holdings. So.
So how has that evolved over time in terms of literally just, hey, I have a skill set, give me some equity, I'm providing some value, to kind of like where you guys are right now?
Yeah, so it's been a long, tumultuous journey, as most people in the cannabis space can appreciate.
Yeah.
Obviously, legality and regulatory frameworks have taken a lot longer than everybody thought. In 2016, 2017, we were looking at like a 2 to 3 year plan to build something and exit. We raised a significant chunk of capital. I took a position as the vice president of business development. Right. We started trying to expand. As the benefit of hindsight is 2020, you couldn't make good deals in cannabis at that time period. The economics just didn't work. So we raised a bunch of capital, spent some time losing some money. I actually resigned my position as the VP of Biz Dev in the end of 2019. Capital markets of cannabis kind of dried up. The company wasn't financially performing super great. I wanted to pursue some other ventures. And so I left. I still remained a large shareholder, as well as a lot of my personal friends and family had invested in the company. So I remained active, but just from a shareholder standpoint, no longer employed by the company. And then in late 21, after some changes to personnel, a couple of my investors called me up concerned about the financials, concerned the way the cannabis space was looking, requested that I take a little harder look. So in the beginning of 22, we started kind of digging into the financials, made some working capital loans, me and another couple guys that were already invested, took some seats on the board. And then, the market actually got worse as time developed. And so in June of 22, we decided it was time to restructure the company. So I actually took over as CEO and massively restructured. And so we laid off lots of people, shut down non-performing assets, reworked underperforming assets. and realized that words like burn rate that used to be pretty common in cannabis to say what's your burn rate. We sat down and decided that wasn't going to be a thing anymore. And so if we didn't have an asset that was going to be profitable within 6 to 12 months, that asset went away.
Right.
And so it was a really tumultuous time. The company was struggling, cannabis was struggling, capital was expensive, regulatory frameworks were difficult. But honestly, I can't say enough about the team that remains at MWG. They were a lot of the folks that were there from the beginning, people I already knew. My business partner, Michael Laria, who had also left MWG prior to this time period, he actually came back with me and has stayed with me to this day, and just literally rockstar nice. Groups. But I just can't stress enough to people the importance of abandoning terms like burn rate. And so you got to get that out of your vocabulary. Cannabis is difficult, but if you go back to really just business basics, it really is. It's a rewarding place to be. I tell everybody right now, there's no better time to be a cannabis investor in California than right now, because the deals are they're out there and they're phenomenal, and the folks that are left are great. So,
right. Yeah, this cannabis, at least right now anyways, it's not like your traditional tech startup that will have a 100x exit at the end of the day. And, you can be like an Uber that's losing however many millions of dollars a year because, sometime in the future, it should pay off anyways, in quotes, right?
Yeah, yeah. I actually don't believe in that business model generally. I know that works for a lot of people, but for me, I focus primarily on cash flow. I always have. It's just the way I'm wired. Right. But we were hoping originally to kind of get that big exit at the end, but it just didn't materialize. So
right, that makes sense. So I would like to take it from the around the 2014 mark to about the 2019. How did you develop the skill set to go from attorney to VP of biz dev? Like, what were the steps that you needed to take from like a personal development standpoint to be able to know the things that you should do? Was it a lot of like, what we would say like ignorance debt, right? You pay it down because you didn't know what to do, so you had to pay money for it, right? Did you get mentors? What did that look like for you around that time?
Yeah, so for me, I would say it was really kind of a turning point in my career, because I realized in 2014 I didn't have the ability to raise $25,000, right?
Right.
And so, but honestly, it was through networking primarily and mentorship from some folks that actually still mentor me to this day.
Nice.
That taught me how to raise capital and put deals together, and what investors are looking to see, and what kind of business fundamentals matter. And so it was honestly just trial and error. Obviously, I wish I could go back and apply the things that I know today then. And so, because I made a lot of mistakes and I learned the hard way, I had some businesses fail, not related to cannabis, but other things that I had tried and failed at during that same time period. And so, learning the hard way is hard, but it's very effective. And so honestly, the law degree, coupled with just general understanding of business from kind of growing up in a self-employed environment, kind of gave me the initial basic tools. But what I tell everybody is there's no substitute for time in the chair. There's no shortcut. There's no, it's really hard to just go to a class and learn something, right? You got to go to the class, learn something, and then apply it. And then after you get done applying it, analyze it and see what worked, what didn't, what works for some people doesn't work for others. And so honestly, the biggest thing I can say is time in the chair, Right. So I use that really for everything, is that, hey, you got to spend the time in the chair that it takes to develop those skill sets. And so for me, I had some natural, acclimation and ability to, put deals together, but coupled with law school and then just spending a lot of time working on it, really kind of just, I'm still learning to this day. Right. And so,
of course.
I learned something. I try to learn something from everything that I do. Even talking to you here, I'm sure I'm going to pick up something that I didn't already know and get an opportunity to apply it at some point in the future. But if you can learn, if you're not afraid to try something and then analyze what you do and not quit and pick up, learn from your mistakes, then that really is the key.
Right. The road up the mountain, the road to 100,000 steps starts with the first one. All those cliche sayings, but it's very true, right?
It's very true, man, and there's just no substitute for it. I wish there was.
Right. So, what was the biggest difference now from being a CEO to VP of Biz Dev? What does your perspective now look like on the business?
Yeah, it's different. It's the same and it's different all at the same time. Sure. I'm actually not big on titles. So when I took over as CEO, I actually sat everybody down and said, look, this is corporate. There's 8 people sitting around a conference table. Whoever's best suited to do a job should do that. And that's kind of my leadership style. I don't really have an ego in the sense that I need to make all the decisions. I'd actually prefer not to make the decisions. And so making decisions is hard and it carries a lot of responsibility with it.
Right.
And I'm not the best suited person to make all the decisions, right? So I rely on my team mostly. And the folks that are best suited to do something get the opportunity to make the decisions in those environments. But that's really the biggest difference is this is the first time where I've really been kind of the head of something where people are looking to me for leadership and guidance outside of my small law firms or things that I've done. And so it's been unique in the sense that there's a lot of responsibility. I feel a lot of pressure for people that are counting on me, especially my team. I don't want to let anybody down. And so whereas, the VP of Biz Dev, I was just responsible for the little portion of what I was responsible for, whereas now everything, the buck stops with me. So,
right. Makes sense. Supreme accountability, right?
Yeah. It's not all cracked up to be, I'll tell you.
Oh man. Yeah. You're telling me. So around that 2019 time, you mentioned, as you say, tumultuous, and I would also say tumultuous, right?
Yeah.
You also mentioned you turned it around. Was the turnaround a result of like key hires as well? Like what did that look like?
Yeah, in 19 is actually when I resigned as the VP of Biz Dev, and then I didn't come back until 2022.
2022,
so,
okay.
Yeah, the turnaround really happened from 2022 till now.
Okay.
But the difference was having the right people in the right place and getting rid of the wrong people in the wrong places. And so we made significant reductions to personnel. But what we really did was what I told everyone was I said, hey, we're switching from a growth model to a profitability focused program here. And so we still wanted to grow. We didn't have the cash. And honestly, we were in, what I call crisis mode, right? Where you're trying to, keep the boat afloat. You're running around plugging holes and less worried about following protocols and making sure everything's buttoned down to rather, making sure everything's going to continue to operate. And so there was a period of time there where I was questioning whether we would be able to keep the boat afloat. And so we were making very serious decisions very quickly without a lot of time for reflection. And so but the turnaround really came down to switching the focus of the company from, hey, we're going to expand and buy revenue at any cost to we're only going to operate profitable business units. And that's it. So,
So aside from obviously, one of the biggest expenses is, payroll, layoffs, overhead, that sort of thing, right? But another kind of expense that a lot of people incur with the growth model is marketing, right? It's like, we're going to spend as much as we possibly can on marketing to get the word out so we can capture as much market share as possible. Was that what you guys were doing in the growth phase as well?
We were spending a fair amount of money on marketing. It's interesting because marketing in cannabis has really been, it started out, you couldn't have a billboard. Then, we actually started doing billboards. We were one of the first companies to start running billboards, and they were extremely successful initially. And then everybody had a billboard, and they didn't seem to make that much difference anymore, right? Yeah. And so we've gone through various iterations of what the marketing plan looked like. When we started restructuring the company in 2022, we cut a very significant amount out of the marketing budget and focused primarily on, search engine optimization, internet, Weedmaps, that sort of thing, stuff that was a little more tangible. So if we couldn't put our arms around what it was going to do for the top line of the business almost instantaneously, we weren't doing it. And so,
So there's been it was maybe a couple months ago, or like late last year, the whole Weedmaps thing about them increasing their prices and stuff like that. Are you still looking at Weedmaps as a primary marketing source as much as you did a few years back?
We cut, when they raised their prices, actually, we cut our spend with them pretty significantly. But we are in conversations with them. I still look at them as a leader in the space.
Of course.
And we are actively engaged in conversations with how we can, kind of boost our participation in their program back up, because we definitely see the value there. So,
right. Nice. So it seems like you have things at least a lot better than they were a few years back, even 2 years ago, right?
Yes, the business has improved tremendously.
Right.
And again, I can't say it enough, primarily due to the people. And so the key to anything I've found in business or life really in general is the people. You got to find the people that fit where they need to go.
Right.
I look at it like a puzzle, right? You got to have the right puzzle piece in the right spot, and then you got to empower those people to do what they do, and then things have a tendency to turn around.
100%. So what are your biggest challenges right now?
Biggest challenges remain very similar to what they were a couple of years ago, although cash flow has obviously improved significantly. The taxation structure in cannabis is difficult. I'm sure you're following all the 280E
Oh yeah.
right now, where
Yep.
people filing returns, deeming it unconstitutional, getting refunds and whatnot. But it still remains a challenging thing. And with challenges like that come expensive professional fees with CPAs and attorneys. So that remains a constant thing on our radar.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, obviously, the regulatory framework is still very difficult. The more jurisdictions that you are in, both from either locally in specific states like California, or nationally across multi-state, you got to really pay attention to the regulations that you're operating in, because things can vary differently from hours that you're open to security that you're required to have, camera systems, you name it. It spans the gamut. So, which creates additional challenges to business. Business is hard. Cannabis business is really hard, and then on top of that, when you're running a cannabis business, the margins aren't what they should be because of the taxation structure.
Right.
So that's really the biggest challenge. I think is regulatory structure and taxation, and then the inability to have access to capital, right? And
Right.
so with the continued lack of banking, right? The cost of capital for cannabis is, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times higher than it is for traditional business. So not only do you have decreased margins and regulatory framework that's stifling, you have, this inability to get access to cash. And so it really is a difficult thing to overcome when you're trying to expand.
Right. Right. I always say, if you want to do something hard, start a business. If you want to do something very, very, very hard, start a cannabis business.
Yeah. No, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And so, that's the thing, is that I didn't realize when I got into the space, just because I hadn't really started anything of size. I'd started a small law firm, and, I'd flipped some houses and done a little bit of investing, but nothing to the scale that we're doing now. And cannabis is hard. So I see that now compared to other things that people that I work with and other things that I'm involved in. It's just, they don't have the same challenges. So kudos to those people that are still fighting the fight and still getting after it, and, still making it work, because it's not for the faint of heart. That's for sure.
Right. Right. A thing that you've mentioned consistently was people. You're saying finding the good people. So how do you identify good people? Or let me start with this question: is, how do you define good people?
I think that it depends, right?
Okay.
And I think it depends on what environment you're working in, what your leadership style is, and I'm still working on answering that question for myself. So I think it's a lifelong journey, and I think it may change over time. But I mean, I think loyalty is one of the most important things. If somebody's loyal and driven, you can do a lot with that. And so, and then finding out where people naturally fit in and are talented. What I found is honestly just kind of take your hands off the wheel and see what people gravitate towards, and then let them run with it. And then also, have the responsibility, the consequence of it, and the benefits of the rewards of it. Right. So we try really hard to make everybody feel like they have a say and that they have a important role in the company, because they do, And so what I tell everybody is that, in reality, I actually don't do that much. And so the most of what's being done is a result of the people that are around me. And so I don't believe in corporate structure or org charts. So I tell everybody we flattened out the org chart. And so because, everybody's equal. The fact that I make the decisions or that I have the CEO title really is, quite frankly, irrelevant to me. I depend on the people around me. And so I look at everybody as, a lot of those people that are working with me are far more capable of making some of the decisions that are being made than I am. And so, but I think finding out a good fit with people, and then if it's not a good fit, identify it quickly and change it. Right. And so and then spend time, investing in other people's successes. I think, I want my team to succeed probably more than I do, and so because I watch how hard they work and I watch how vested they are in what we're doing. And it really is a powerful thing when you get a group that works and clicks well together. And I don't think it happens all the time. I was fortunate because I actually inherited a really good team of people that were built by somebody else. And so, but I couldn't have done it better. And having those people in the right place really actually saved the company, So,
Right. But before we continue, if you're enjoying this episode and are looking for some marketing help for your own dispensary, you can check us out at cannabudmarketing.com or visit us in the links in the description below. Now, on to the rest of the episode. Are you part of the hire fast, fire fast team?
yeah, I hate
Hire slow, fire fast. Hire slow, fire fast.
Hire slow, fire fast. Yeah.
Hire slow,
So
fire
I
fast.
hate hiring and I hate firing. Actually, I try to lean on the people around me. That's one of the things that I rely on other people for. And so I have very few people that actually report directly to me. And so even when I say report, like it's more of a conference room table like type discussion where like if I'm wrong, I want to hear it. I want somebody to tell me, and I want to listen and then evaluate. And most of the time, like if I'm wrong, I'll just I'm wrong, and move on, right? Because living, it's not that important to me. And so, but yeah, I try to be as replaceable as possible.
Okay, nice.
And so by letting other people do most of the hiring and firing, that really facilitates that. Because the people that I work with are people that I've worked with for a decade, and so those folks were a very tight knit group, and then they go out and build their teams, and then it makes it so I don't have to worry about it. It's great,
right? So you have it sounds like you have absolute trust in your team as well, which I think is a really awesome character trait of a leader.
I have 1,000% trust, more trust in some of them than I have in myself because I've watched them in action and they are really epic. So
right. There's competence and there's evidence to back up that they're actually competent versus just words that are coming out their mouth.
100%, and that is a good point, right? Is that trust but verify.
Right.
And so I've watched these people over the years make really, really good decisions consistently, day in and day out. And so that leads me to feel 1,000% confident. So
right.
Yeah, you don't want to just hand somebody the keys and be like, oh yeah, go for it, right? And so
exactly. So I know that you're at a point to where again your team is 1,000% competent, right? And being able to execute on different plans and strategies and stuff like that, right? But running multiple employees, multiple stores, there's just like a lot of people, right? And I would assume, just like in any relationship, business, personal, anything, there will be not necessarily disagreements, but just kind of I think this way, you think another way. Let's kind of sit down and decide what way is the best way moving forward, right? Not an argument or anything like that.
100%.
But
Yep.
How do you balance the vision you have in your head of the way you want something to be to where maybe the team might say something different, right? Like, what point in time do you know that you should defer and be like, okay, I think you're right, to where, hey, I think this is the right way that we should go? And then how do you then get that implemented through the rest of the company? Because you talking with 8 people at the conference table, great. But then when you now have to implement that to 20, 50, 100 employees to get that to actually happen, what does that process look like? And how do you make sure it's done effectively?
Yeah. So here's what I believe in, right? If you can't convince somebody of something, number one, perhaps you shouldn't be working with them, right? And so because typically what we do is we try not to leave an idea or a thought process until it's unanimous. So even with our board right now, so the board of directors at MWG, we have not made a decision that hasn't been unanimous over the course of the near 24 months that I've been acting as CEO, right? And so and the reason for that is because personality type, number one, people are open-minded, and number two, people trust the people that are in the role, so that if I come to them with a position, I can say, look, you're in a better position than we are to make that decision, so we're going to back you 100%, right?
Sure.
And that same leadership kind of structure that they take with me is the structure that I take with my team, which is, say, we're going to sit around the table and we're going to talk about this until we all agree on a path that works going forward. I have yet to find a situation where people disagree to such an extent that it becomes a roadblock, right? And
Right.
so, because ultimately, if you're dealing with rational people and you talk, some people may not like it, and they may think a better course is more suitable, but they don't disagree necessarily with the
Sure.
course that you're on. But
Sure.
in order to be effective, you have to get people to buy in to what you're saying, or in my opinion, don't bother doing it.
Right.
Because if I can't get my team to buy in and get excited about what I'm doing, then they're not going to be effective in passing that same vision on to the people that they talk to, right? And I think that's how you get the the vision out to the team, is you get people to buy into it and you get excited about it like it's their own. And that's one of the things that I really try to focus on, is like getting people's buy-in and getting excited about what we're doing. And so,
Right. Right. When it comes to different things like product selection, working with vendors, managing staff, is that something that you would say that your team also handles, or do you play a part in that part at all?
I play a very small part in that. And so that's
Sure.
mostly my team. I don't have the same level of expertise with the products and the vendors, but even that's broken out across several different like layers, because there's some folks that really have a good handle on margins and specials and buying, and other people that
Hmm.
have a really good handle on vendor relationships and product selection. And so we spread that out amongst multiple people, and even then it's a team kind of decision. Um, I do have some relationships with some of the larger vendors that help. So sometimes I'll get involved in that, but most of the time I leave that to the folks that are more competent in doing it.
All right. Perfect. Um, where do you see the future of the cannabis industry heading?
Gosh, I wish I knew. And so I do believe that eventually we're going to see the rescheduling, from class one to class
Right.
three.
Right.
When that is, feels like it's coming soon. What I tell everybody is it feels a little different now than it did before. I've spent the last decade of my life telling everybody, with the next 2 to 3 years, legalization is coming. One of
Yeah.
these times I'm
Yeah.
going to be right, So,
Yeah. Say it every year, you'll be right.
yeah, one day you'll be right. Right now I'm not doing too well, on my predictions, but I do believe that you're going to see the industry continue to develop. I think that you're going to continue to see what you're seeing right now, which is a shift towards more value-centered products, and kind of the fall off of that higher end, top shelf, kind of market.
Hmm.
Um, because number one, the economy is hard right now and people are struggling. So there's that shift to value. But number two, capitalism is doing what capitalism does, and they're driving product prices down.
Right.
So which I think is really the key, to kind of the elimination of the traditional market. I heard somebody said something the other day that was funny. They said you won't find a good drug dealer in the Central Valley in California anymore. And the reason for that is because the dispensaries in kind of the Central Valley are charging really, really low prices, and so
Right.
the margins are really light, and so they're actually beating, I think, the kind of the traditional market, and so there's less competition there for that. So,
Right.
but I think you'll see that continue. People will continue. The folks that are good at what they're doing are getting bigger right now,
Hmm.
and you're going to continue to see that consolidation. I think you'll see some relaxation of the regulatory framework and the taxation piece with the rescheduling. And then I think you'll continue to see the folks that are working hard and kind of, maybe under the radar right now will continue to expand and be something significant. So
Right. 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 What advice would you give yourself if you were to start all over again?
probably find a different avenue. So, no, it's not true. I mean, I've enjoyed my time. It's been a really difficult task.
Right.
Had I known what I know now, I might not have put myself through that. But I don't regret the path.
Hmm.
It's been an experience to not only learn about myself, but about business and about people. But I think what I would tell myself if I could go back is to not lose sight of basic business fundamentals,
Right.
to not get focused on an exit. Um,
Mm.
because I think if you get focused on an exit, you lose sight of operations, which I think is just a huge mistake. You got to operate the business first, worry about an exit later. I think now that we're probably what's real is that when you're the least worried about an exit, that's when the exit opportunity will present itself. And so focus on operations, focus on cash flow, focus on expenses, Hawkeye cost, especially in this space. You need to justify every penny that goes out. And then if you spend $1, you need to be able to generate $5 to $10 of revenue with that dollar,
Right.
So because it's hard, because margins aren't the same and things are tough. So you've got to be doing it better than everybody else. That's kind of my metric when people ask me what are you focused on. It's like, well, I'm looking to see what everybody else is doing and making sure that we're doing it as good or better, because you don't know what the regulatory framework is going to be. But if you can assure yourself that if you're ahead of the pack, that you're going to be okay. I think that's the best you can do in this space.
Right. We have a interesting segment that I just added to the show, where I ask the previous guest owner, say, hey, what question do you have for the next guest owner that I haven't on the show? So the question from the previous dispensary owner asked, how do you go about keeping your staff motivated, happy, and invested in the business, especially when you have to manage and deal with so many different employees?
Yeah, I think that kind of goes back to something I was saying before. You got to have people that believe in the vision, especially at the kind of the upper table. You have to have buy-in, because when you have people buying into a vision, like it's their own, they get excited about it. And when they have an opportunity to shape something, they get excited about it. And so and when people are excited, it's contagious. And so when we came back in March of 22, the morale at the business was very, very low. There was a corporate ladder to get to anybody, to talk to anybody, and to raise any issues. And people felt disconnected and disjointed. I think you have to bring people in to a point where they feel like they're vested and that they care about what they're doing. And I think if you do that, the rest of it kind of takes care of itself. There's always going to be issues. There's always going to be personnel issues. There's always going to be, the hiring and the firing and, the disgruntled folks. And that's just life. People have issues. We're all human. We're all actually dealing with the same stuff outside of work, whether it be, relationally, financially, physically. We all have issues, right? We're humans, are messy. And that stuff, unfortunately, has a, decent chance of crossing over into the workforce. And so, because you just can't isolate that. And so, but I think recognizing that everyone's human, and we're all just trying to figure it out, and dealing with things in that kind of with that light, is kind of the key to it all. But mainly just getting people excited and all rowing the boat together, because once you get kind of that energy, it's contagious, and so people want to be a part of it. We haven't figured it out all the way. And I'm sure we'll never figure it out all the way, but we're going to continue to work that direction where everybody's a part and everybody's important. I don't care what you're doing for the company. Nothing's, I'll sweep the floors if I need to. That's, I grew up doing that. And so I believe that everybody's role is important, and they should feel that way, and it should feel meaningful. But I think if you successfully get people's buy-in and make people understand that, that every job is important, that really goes a long ways towards, keeping everybody motivated and happy.
Right. And is that just like really good communication? Consistent communication, just kind of reiterating those points and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think it's consistent communication up and down the chain, right? And so so that every interaction turns into an opportunity to share a vision. We use Discord a lot across company.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, it's actually really cool. That's what we started out doing. I'm actually not as active on it as I wanted to be when we started it, just because I've been busy. But occasionally I'll just get on there and post something to the entire organization, like, hey, great job, everybody. It's a team environment. But primarily what I try to do is influence the people that I'm around. And then I tell them to do the same thing. Hey, you got to influence the people that you're around. And so, especially when it's something important, if there's a big change, I'll tell people, hey, make sure you get this out to your people and get it out this way, so that people know that, number one, with big changes in organizations, especially when we were laying a lot of people off, obviously any communication from anyone was difficult, because people were concerned about their jobs, and rightfully so. So we did the layoffs quickly. And then when we were done, we told everybody, hey, don't worry, we were done for a minute. And if there's going to be a change and we need to make more changes, we'll let you know, because I don't want people sitting around worrying about it. Right. So just kind of, you're right, that communication is crucial. How you get it out is kind of dependent, I think, on your organization. We like Discord, and then we like obviously weekly calls and things like that to make
Of
sure that
course.
people stay in the know, because you don't want people sitting around guessing and speculating, because that's just not good for anybody.
Yeah, you don't want a team of just highly anxious people wondering if they're going to get an email saying, "Hey, come into my office."
Yeah. So, and then conversely, same thing. I think you want to get the good news out too, right? And
Of
so
course.
so that's one thing that we're being conscious of right now, is kind of trying to make sure that people know that, hey, there's big things coming. We're not done yet as a company growing. There's going to
Hmm.
be opportunities to, continue to grow with the organization. And what I tell my team is that hopefully someday somebody's taking my job. And
Yeah.
so and that's the goal, is to coach people up, and and a lot of the people that work around me will do a better job than I'm doing right now. I can tell you that. So
Yeah. I think as, business owners, just overall people looking to solve problems, if you will, a lot of times we can gloss over the wins in life, where it's just like we always look at, okay, what's the next problem to solve? What's the next problem to solve? Fix this, fix this, fix this.
yeah.
And, that's just kind of the way we need to view the business as, a thing to solve, essentially, right? This infinite
Hmm.
unsolvable problem.
Problems. Yeah.
But from a micro, from a team environment, and I think even from like a subconscious self environment, if you just keep telling yourself that things are wrong all the time, you will kind of have that confirmation bias that, oh, this needs to get fixed. And I think it is really nice to boost the morale of the rest of the team. Say, hey, we did a really, really good job. We buckled down, we set these goals, these were our KPIs, and we hit them. And then, on to the next one. But I think it's really important to celebrate the wins as much as it is to try and iterate and solve the problems as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I tell everybody, my family especially, like, it's a bad news sandwich, right? So you always want to, anything you're doing, you want to start with good news and what you're doing right, and then interlace some things that can maybe be fixed, and then at the end, you want to end with also positivity. So I actually think it's more
100%.
important to focus on the wins than it is to focus on the losses. Like maybe
Mm.
2 to 3 times as important. What I tell my wife is, depending on the mood she's in, sometimes it's like a double decker good news, where it's like good news, good news. Here's a little
Yeah.
piece of bad news, good news, good
Yeah.
news. And so,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but you've got it. You're right about that. You've definitely got to tell people when they do a good job. You've got to celebrate the wins, because wins are
Mm-hmm.
what empower people to do the next thing, right? So if you
100%.
give them some positive feedback and say, "Hey, that was really good when you did that," right? Or these decisions you make are really, really making a meaningful difference, then I think that builds confidence, and then it empowers them to do the next good thing. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, what question would you have for the next person I interview? I don't know who it is yet, but it would be a dispensary owner. What question would
Yeah,
you have for them?
honestly, the question that I'm looking to answer and that I'm struggling with myself right now
Mm-hmm.
is, when does it make sense to move to other states, right? And
Understood.
so we tried it a couple times in the past. We went to New Mexico and struggled, and we went to Rhode Island and struggled. And so now we're wholly California focused, but we have a model of what I feel like is a model for success here in California now, that we're kind of really dialing down.
Right.
When does it make sense to check out other states? I think it's opportunistic in various different new markets that are coming online.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not scared is the wrong word, but cautious
Of course.
about getting outside of the state, because I think it's hard. It's, doing anything is hard. Doing stuff across state lines is really hard. So
Right. Right.
so those, when is the right time to expand beyond borders, I guess, is really the
Right.
question I'm struggling with. So
That's interesting. One of the things that pop up, and I don't have the specific answer because I don't personally run a dispensary. But when I ask you, what's your current biggest problem right now? Again, it wasn't necessarily, oh, your standard sales, marketing, all that stuff. It was very much things outside of your control, the compliance, the regulatory stuff, and all those different things like that, right? So if
yeah,
you were to move to different spaces, by that kind of thought process, your also biggest problem would still be compliance and regulation in those different states, right?
a hundred
So,
percent.
maybe it's not even a time, it's a how competent and comfortable do you feel within any regulatory guidelines, no matter what the state is. And then that would
Yeah,
be a different way to kind of take a look at that. Because if you know that you can deal with those types of regulations and the compliance and stuff like that, that would be one of the things that I would take a look at, because that is your biggest problem now. And it definitely will be your biggest problem moving somewhere else, because honestly, personnel, buyer behavior, marketing, it's generally the same thing. Give a good product, give a good service, that sort of thing. But then when it comes to what you're actually allowed to do, or else, whoever governing body says you're not allowed to do this, right? that would be the thing. And, diving into the papers and like really looking into the weeds. And, I'm sure you've had tons of that experience as an attorney, but I don't know if you want to get back into that again,
Yeah.
but, that might be the next play.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's a good way to think about it. So
yeah. So what's next in store for you, in the near future?
So we're working on some pretty big things that we're really excited about. We're going to try to boost up our internal product brands. Actually, we just launched a new product brand called Cap City.
Nice.
That we're pretty pumped about seeing how that does. It's hitting the shelves here really, really soon. And then we are working on smart integration. The vertically integrated was kind of a catchphrase in cannabis since the beginning, is that, hey, you got to be vertically integrated. I don't really believe you have to be vertically integrated, but I do believe that smart integration makes sense. So we are looking for synergistic, consolidation opportunities across the supply chain, with both distribution, cultivation, manufacturing, and all of that, so that we can, send more value-centered quality products to the consumer. Because ultimately, when the price comes down on quality products and value is created, the consumer wins, and that's really what the target is. And so, our goal is to maximize the value. And people, I think, confuse value with price. Sometimes that's reflective of price, but you can get a really good value even on higher priced products, right? Yeah. And so we want to make sure the consumer realizes and believes they're getting a value. And so we're going to do that through offering internal lines both at our shops and then also up and down the state in California. And so we have some mergers and some things we're working on that's going to make that more viable. So stay tuned for some pretty exciting things. I think we're getting close to the finish line on some of it, so we'll be excited to roll that out.
Awesome. And where can people find you if they want to get in touch, or the stores?
It's www.perfectunion.com. That'll have all of our store locations, updates, and it'll also have our Instagram handles on there. So
awesome.
But we'd always love new customers coming to the store. Always looking for feedback, and so welcome the opportunity to serve everyone. So
100%. Well, Tom, thank you very much for hopping on the Dispensary Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon.
My pleasure. Thanks for having us.
And I will see you guys later. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Dispensary Marketing Podcast. My name's Brandon Kwan, and I'm the founder of Cannabis Marketing, the #1 marketing agency of choice for dispensaries, both in the United States and in Canada. If you ever want to get in touch with me about any marketing strategies, tips, and tricks, I can definitely help you. Just go visit our website at cannabismarketing.com. That's CANNABUD marketing.com, or just check the links in the description below. Until next time, talk to you later. Bye.